Welcome to the Main Street Counsel podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Main Street Counsel podcast with Ms. Jasmin Hurley. She is the founder of JH Legal and a transactional business attorney who brings big law experience to mainstream businesses. She helps owners make smart legal decisions before things feel urgent, explaining complex issues in plain English without panic or legalese. I'm Evan Mack, and today we're talking about when a business really needs a lawyer and when it actually doesn't. Hello, Ms. Jasmin. Welcome.
Thanks, Evan. How are you doing?
I'm well. Before we kind of get into the topic, can you share a bit about your background and kind of what led you to focus your practice on Main Street businesses instead of that traditional big law path?
Yeah, thanks for that question. My path started actually in the Army. I started out as an officer, graduated from West Point,
Amazing.
commissioned in the Army. And while I was in the Army as a military police officer, I'd always thought about becoming a lawyer. Being on one side of the legal system was really interesting to me. Coincidentally, as I was going through law school after I left the military and had spent a little bit of time in corporate America, I realized that I had a true passion for helping folks start their businesses and understand how to navigate the intricacies and ins and outs and really building something for themselves. I actually left and after I graduated from law school, I started in big law. So I worked for larger law firms in the Columbus, Ohio area, really learning from them and medium-sized to larger businesses some of the issues, some of the concerns, some of the more proactive things that can be happening on the front end before they become issues on the back end. And I thought, hey, this would be great to be able to do for smaller businesses that are earlier in their stage, and provide them with not only that counsel, but something that also hits them with their needs and their price point as well. In 2024, started JH Legal here in Washington Courthouse, Ohio, and really focusing on those Main Street businesses, those businesses they have their brick and mortars in their homes, their brick and mortars are downtown, they're looking for their brick and mortar, they're looking at making that jump from the main hustle to the side hustle, and really need that counsel early on, as opposed to later on when it's going to cost more money and it becomes a larger issue to solve.
Oh, wow. Many business owners assume they need either need a lawyer for everything or when something goes wrong. How do you generally think about that line when legal help actually makes sense versus when it really doesn't?
Yeah, it really is dependent upon the business. It depends on where the business sits. It depends on what they are doing in that particular time. A lawyer is not going to be able to provide you with advice on every single step of the way, because some of these decisions are either business decisions or totally outside of our wheelhouse. I always joke, we work well as attorneys, we work well with accountants, your CPA, because I'm not the one who's filing your tax forms, but you better believe your CPA knows in and out exactly what forms they're supposed to be, when to file, those types of things. We generally know, but there are folks who have a more specific wheelhouse. It also really depends on the issue that you have, right? I
Mm.
had someone call me this morning. They wanted to talk about patents. I am not a patent attorney. I handle trademarks and copyrights, but patent attorneys are highly specialized in what they do. They take a
Right.
whole separate bar, and you want a patent attorney to be advising you on patents in the same way you want a tax attorney to be advising you on tax situations and other specialized issues that pop up. You want to get an attorney that understands those highly specialized issues. And then there are those folks who wait till the last minute, right? If there is something that you have a question on, it becomes a legal issue, it might be a legal question. The last thing you want to do is wait until you have been sued, right? Or wait until you've been sued, you've been served, and then you don't respond at all, because now it becomes more of a legal issue. You may be financially liable for a huge issue. So I always say, for folks, it really depends on, where they are, the stage, the type of issues that they have,
Mm.
and asking the questions early on and establishing a relationship with an attorney sooner rather than later will ultimately help get them to the right spot.
Yeah, and speaking of those stages, in the early stages of business, what kind of decisions usually benefit from that kind of legal guidance? Which ones can owners reasonably handle on their own without creating maybe problems later?
Yeah. The biggest question I get, especially in the formation stage of a business, is what should I be? Should I be an LLC? Should I be a sole proprietor? I want
Right.
to be a corporation. A lot of folks don't realize either the back end tax implications of that, or there are other things that have to happen when it comes to their governance, the documents that are required, what the status of your members, your owners, your founders are in that particular business entity formation that you choose. So, asking those types of questions before you file your paperwork with your state secretary of state is really important. Making sure that you have those documents in place. If you go to the banks will ask you, do you have any authorizing resolutions giving you the authority to open a bank account for this particular business? Do you have the business registration? So, asking an attorney before you start forming, what does that look like? What should
Mm,
I be? What is the liability? What are my obligations as I go through this formation in this particular way is incredibly important and can prevent you from either forming incorrectly, being stuck in a tax classification that you don't want to be in for the
mm.
next 60 months, 5 years, or, adding more to your plate than you really need with your type of formation.
Wow. So what tend to happen if someone waits too long to involve a lawyer, even though things don't feel that serious yet?
Yeah. I think the ultimate worst case scenario is always a lawsuit, right? Because once
Yeah.
the lawsuit, you get into litigation, you get into the courts, then you need to hire an attorney. Usually, you have to hire an attorney, especially if you are a business entity, and that can get pretty pricey because you're being very reactive. You're paying for someone's time. It can get expensive. Um, Other things are disputes that can get expensive because now you are trying to negotiate and trying to settle an issue between between members, between founders and owners,
Mhm.
especially if things were not papered properly, promises were made. If you take someone's money and it's not properly memorialized, and that person tries to either get their money back or you promise to give them something back, heaven forbid you are stealing their money, you may be committing fraud
Mm,
unknowingly without without papering that. So there are a bunch of different issues and they all result in having to be highly reactive to that particular issue, which is not, especially for businesses that are just starting out, you don't have a lot of runway, right? You're starting out with your seed money to get your business going.
mhm,
You're not accounting for, okay, I might have an issue with a vendor, I might have an issue with a founder. You're not accounting for that in your budget because that's not something that you normally account for in your business. There's very rarely, or there are folks who have like the rainy day litigation fund right when they start their business.
mhm. But on the other hand, are there situations where hiring a lawyer too early or for the wrong issue doesn't really add value to the business owner?
Correct.
Mhm,
Absolutely. I give presentations all the time, and part of my presentation, as we're going through formation, is when do you call the attorney? What are
mm,
the red flags? What are the triggers for you to call an attorney? And then what type of attorney do you call? Because we all do a whole bunch of different things.
mhm,
Myself as a business attorney, my wide range, I provide support throughout the life cycle of the business. But again, there are certain things that I do not do. I do not do patents. I do not litigate. I can litigate very rarely, but there are folks where that is all that they do. So if you're going to a courtroom, I'm going to get you to somebody who not only understands how to navigate that courtroom, but probably understands how to navigate that particular courtroom. Because there are advantages to folks being able to understand those issues, those nuances. That's their particular area of law. And they may also know how to mitigate and how to avoid some of the issues that may also be popping up later on down the road.
mhm. So, Miss Jasmine, how does the answer to "Do I need a lawyer" change as a business starts to grow, take on partners, hire employees, or maybe generate more revenue?
Yeah. Yeah. So I like to say, it is dependent, but there are trigger points. Usually when you first start, should you hire a lawyer? Yes. Establish a relationship with a general business attorney, someone like myself, who can at least advise you on the formation, understanding what your tax obligations are, how you navigate your initial growth, right? Adding, if you're not adding employees, how are you working with independent contractors? How are you working with your vendors, your suppliers, depending on your business? What are those initial contracts that you need put in place? Another trigger is as a business continues to grow, if you have a large volume of contracts that are flowing through your business
Mm,
that are not, pre vetted, right? You haven't put them together beforehand with working with an attorney. You're highly negotiated. You're working with a larger company. If you're a smaller company, you're working with a larger company. You want to make sure that you have an attorney look at those agreements, help you negotiate those agreements so you understand your obligations, but maybe can also put you in a better position as you're negotiating with those vendors, suppliers, contractors. Hiring
mm,
employees, definitely. If you're hiring employees, you want to make sure that you understand what your obligations are as an employer. Um, you want to make sure you have the right paperwork in place. And you want to make sure that if those employees are not doing what they are supposed to do, you understand what you can and cannot fire them for, because there are certain things that you cannot fire an employee for, like
mm.
discrimination and certain things that
Right.
those cause some issues. Folks that are in protected classes, as you're going through the hiring process, you can't ask certain questions. Those are prohibited questions. So understanding what that looks like, especially if you are a business owner and you are handling all of that yourself and you don't have like an HR professional, a fractional marketing person, fractional HR helping you in that particular situation.
Mm. So for business owners listening who want to be, thoughtful, proactive, not reactive, what should they be paying attention to so they can recognize when it's time to bring in that legal support, into the picture?
Yeah, when I always say whenever there is an issue that pops up in a contract. So if you have a question, a concern, someone may not be meeting the obligations of that particular contract. I have a client who said, "Hey, we need to terminate this. They're not doing what they're supposed to do." They came to me and I reviewed the agreement. They could early terminate, but they had to pay a fee, and they had to then pay fees for deinstallation of equipment. So being able to advise someone of that before they send the termination letter is incredibly helpful, because, you could be paying a lot more in termination fees. You could, go through protracted settlement. It can
Mhm.
become a whole big issue. So understanding what that looks like. In the end, if you decide, hey, I'm going to move forward with it, fine. That's a business decision. I'm here to advise you on what's the best case, the worst case, and the most likely case scenarios in these types of situations. But ultimately, these are business decisions for you to make. And it's one of the things that I love about being an attorney and saying, hey, here's what you can do, but this is your business. I'm helping guide you, but
Right.
you're the one at the helm. I'm not the one at the helm. You are the one at the helm. I'm standing next to you as the first mate in some instances to say, hey, watch out. There's, obstacles ahead. There's bad weather. We should probably stay away from that. And if you don't want to listen to me, that's fine. That's your prerogative to steal that way. And to, if you want to take the risk, that's what you can do.
Amazing. Miss Jasmine, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Evan. Have a good one.
You too. And that's it for today's episode of the Main Street Counsel podcast. To learn more about Jasmin Hurley and her work with Main Street businesses, visit jhlegalohio.com. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to like, subscribe to the show, and leave a review if you found this episode helpful. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.